Good morning. How are you all? Great. So, have to start off with a story. I just got back off of a vacation last night. I'm coming back from Savannah, where it was 90 degrees and sunny. And back here in D.C., it's been about 15 or 14 days of rain. Really dreary. And the story is that I have a 3.5-year-old, and we drive, right, because he hasn't had his first flight. So you can imagine being in a car with a 3.5-year-old for 10 hours. The saving grace was that we had access to the internet. And so I was able to give him my phone and put up ABC Mouse, PBS Kids, and all I kept hearing about was PJ Masks and Paw Patrols, but he was excited, he was quiet, he even told me when he had to stop and go to the potty, right? So anyway, just wanted to share with you that story, but the reality is that I tried to figure out over the last few days, what would life be like without the internet? And so for the past week, I've been with my wife and my 3-year-old, and I realized how important the internet is. I woke up this morning, and every day I woke up in Savannah, I picked up my cell phone, as perhaps many of you all do, and I checked out the news, and I was able to stay abreast of what was going on in the news, internationally and locally. I was also able to kind of determine what my day was going to look like, just depending on the weather pattern. I was able to check my bank account to figure out how much money I could allow our family to actually spend that day. Had to make certain that I got paid, actually. My wife wanted to shop, so I had to make certain that indeed I kind of had the map of where it is we were going, and I pulled down all of the coupons that I could then hand her digitally so that we could save money. I also was able to communicate with my child's school. So the more important thing, I was able to communicate with my child's school. Now, he's a 3-year-old, and his teachers are on the internet, and they're sending me these messages about, what's planned for the coming week, but also what activities he missed for that week, and what work assignments we should be kind of pushing him on. He's a 3-year-old, right? Now, mind you, it wasn't anything serious. It's all lightweight stuff like cutting out letters and pasting them. But the fact that he's going to a school and he has parents who have access to the internet and he has teachers who communicate with not only one parent but both parents, and pretty soon they'll be communicating directly with him, is truly a testament of how important the internet is and how important it is for everyone to be connected. Now, the sad reality is that there are many folk who are not connected. There are many families who are not connected at all, and the digital divide is actually real. And so I just want to kind of reiterate some of the things the Secretary hit on this morning. This administration, the President Obama's administration, started off with ConnectEd. The idea is that we wanted to connect all schools, or the largest majority of them, over 95% of the schools, to the internet. Great, so you have kids who are now connected at school, but what does that look like for them at home? So now you have the administration pushing ConnectHome, and we're learning a lot. Now, ConnectHome is, now you bring home the internet. So you go from connecting schools, but now bringing internet home. And now the idea is to connect all. And there is a real strong push to make certain that we connect all. I'll share with you why I think that this is important. And being a data wonk and working in a data shop, we're able to do some really cool things. So many of you know about it's the American Community Survey, and there are questions in the American Community Survey that ask about in-home access to a computer. Also, there are questions in there that ask about in-home access to the internet. So you can imagine having the survey in one hand, but then having HUD-assisted household data on the other hand, and then being able to link the two and then tell a pretty interesting story, right? So here's the story. Of all households in the American Community Survey, about 84% of them have a computer in the home. Of those households with children, about 93% of them have a computer in the home. Great, so we know that a large chunk of all households have computers in the home. When we look at HUD-assisted renters, if we look at HUD-assisted renters, about 60% of them have a computer in the home. If we look at HUD-assisted renters with children, about 80% of them have a computer in the household. So it tells me a couple of things, and this is something that we are struggling with. And I think that we have to be, much more open to the idea that folk who are receiving assistance have the same aspirations as everyone else. And so I think that one of the things that we can do is we should really step back from kind of what our thinking is around this and understand that families, whether they're poor or rich, they have the same aspiration, especially if they have kids. I don't know many poor families who basically say, I want my kid to grow up and have a lousy education and turn up to be a nobody who ends up in jail. That doesn't happen for poor people. They aspire for internet access and education the same way that middle class and wealthy families. The calculus may be different, but the aspirations are, in my estimation, is no different. So that's, I think, what this is telling us. And let me share with you why I think it's telling us that even more. In-home internet access, that is a subscription. Total households, 75%, 74.4, let's just call it 75%. Of those with kids, 82.5. So no kids in the household, just a little bit lower, but with kids in the household, it jumps. Now let's look at those with HUD-assisted renters, those that are HUD-assisted renters. So internet in the household, 43%. Those with kids, 57%, right? So again, the aspirations based on that is just no different. They trend the same way. So I think the first thing we need to do is that the aspiration is the same. Households with kids, they want the same that middle-class families want with kids. So I share that with you because when we think about ConnectHome, we really need to think about the way that this administration is framing it. You provide access to the schools, right? Make certain that kids have access in the schools, that every kid has access in the school. Then you figure out a strategy to make certain that that comes home, right? The aspiration's the same. We should make certain that indeed the access is the same. So schools, home, and now the strategy is to connect all. And working with partners or stakeholders, we're able to kind of push the agenda forward. The last thing I would say before I turn it over and we begin a discussion about what's going on as it relates to Google Fiber and ConnectHome is that this is difficult work, challenging work. So I'll come back to this, but this pilot initiative has 28 communities. And the challenges that each community, and some of you all are here, right? The challenges that many of these communities are facing, there is no one-size-fits-all, and the stats that I just read, that's the average. It doesn't apply across the board. There are many communities that are well below that, and there are many communities that are well above that. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to figure out how to bring everyone forward, but make certain that everyone is coming forward based on what they have access to, the actual resources available to them, and try to close as many of those resource gaps as possible. So with that in mind, I want to turn it over now to Erica Swanson with Google Fiber, who can talk about the Google Fiber experience.
Hi, I'm Erica Swanson. Thanks, Calvin. And thank you, Abra, for really identifying the intersectionality of so much of this work: affordable housing, education, and connectivity, technology connectivity. This is a very important space to be having this conversation, and hopefully a chance to bring in some of the practice we have in the field. I know I was somewhat asked to share what our work is, what Google Fiber is doing, and I will do a bit of that. I want to share with you a little bit about what we're doing. I hope more importantly, I want to share why we're doing what we're doing in a way that we can then extrapolate some of those insights. My hope would be that if I spend a few minutes sharing what we are learning, what we are doing and what we are learning, it may inspire some of you to see the intersection, the connection to the education or the affordable housing work that you are doing, and see the connection to digital inclusion work. And if you aren't already intentionally doing digital inclusion work, you begin to consider what that might look like within your own practice. I also hope that if that's not the case, I hope that as a private sector partner, some of the insights I share can help you really reframe, think about the ways that you work with other private sector partners. Those public-private partnerships are so many in the work that we do. And I'd like to be able to wear that hat and share with that as well. My background, just real quickly, I'm called to this work after many, many years in the nonprofit and advocacy sector. Came into what I think we, in MBA speak, would be corporate social responsibility work as an advocate and practitioner. And I try to stay really, really grounded in that. So if I get into corporate mumbo jumbo, you just give me the flag, and that'll be important accountability. First, I think, Calvin, so much of what you said is really right? This is the aspirations of so many of the families that we're serving who live in HUD-assisted housing are very, very similar to the aspirations of middle-class and affluent families. The approach that Google Fiber as an internet service provider is taking is to treat all of these customers as customers, whether they are paying us for premium service or whether we are giving them service for free. I'll talk about what that looks like. But first I want to start with what we're doing and why. So Google Fiber is an internet service provider. We're an autonomous business within the Alphabet family of companies. I have to practice saying that. That still doesn't come out real easily. But we're within the Alphabet family of companies. And it is an ambitious bet that by working to make the internet better and faster for more people, we can do really good things for the core businesses at Google. We can also fundamentally move forward the web, the American web, and the experience that we have as internet users. This quote from President Obama in Cedar Rapids of last year really speaks to why faster, better internet service is so critical to our ability to compete in today's economy, to our ability to prepare for those jobs of the future. And so much of what we are doing is about making the web faster. We're probably best known for the work we're doing to bring about a gigabit web. So a gigabit is 1,000 megabits per second. We are building fiber to the home networks that allow people internet speeds of 1,000 megabits per second. Real quickly, the average internet speed, the average American is getting about 14 to 17 megabits per second. So it is a magnitude of order faster than what you're getting. And there's all sorts of wonderful applications, right? So you could be running Netflix and Khan Academy and gaming and uploading files all at the same time within your house. So we think that speed is really going to be that next chapter of the internet. And oftentimes we talk about internet speed and we talk about internet access like they are two completely distinct conversations. And what we're really looking to do is to shift those away from the polarity kind of thinking about this, right? It's not either faster internet or better and more ubiquitous internet. But when we are working in deep partnership in communities, we can do both at the same time. And also, by the way, families who are coming online for the first time want good, fast internet, right? Those are the same aspirations. You don't want to get online for the first time, overcome multiple points of friction, considerable behavioral changes you have to make if you are going to become an internet adopter for the first time, to get online and then have a really crummy, slow experience where the dial-up, kind of days of old. So we think that there's a way to do both at the same time. Make the web faster, make it better, bring more people online. These are the cities that Google Fiber is actively in. We lose some of the coloring here, but some of these are active fiber cities. Kansas City was our first city, home to great barbecue, home to fast internet. Many other cities that we are actively building in right now. So we are constructing fiber network. That means stringing fiber to utility poles, digging up the rights of way to lay thousands and thousands of miles of fiber in these markets. And then others are potential fiber cities and metro areas where we're in robust conversation with city leaders to understand, can we build a network in your community? And I need to update this map. We've added San Francisco since I last took this screenshot. So we're working to bring fiber to San Francisco. Let me just say something again, if I wanted to just share some insights from this corporate social responsibility hat that I wear. The work around digital inclusion is core to our business model, and that's a pretty unique place for us to sit. We are in this ecosystem of practice that has been rapidly growing since 2009, and NTIA made some very large investments through the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program around both access and adoption. So we really stand on the shoulders of a lot of the people who've come before and done a lot of that work. We know there are other providers who are also doing incredible things to make the internet more affordable for more people. We're a data-driven company. We're looking at how we can make our community investments in ways that are data-driven and built on that practice. The first thing that we know, we look at the data that comes from the American Community Survey, we look at Pew, we look at data put out by the Council of Economic Advisors during this last couple of initiatives the White House has announced, and we know that the most important thing that we can do as an internet service provider is make the internet more affordable for people who are low income, including those living in poverty and in HUD-assisted housing. And so much of what we are doing is working to make the web more affordable. We do that through our core product lines. So we have a basic broadband service that starts at $15 a month. We also know that for some families, $15 a month is more than they can pay right now. If we're asking them to make significant behavioral changes, we're asking them to make the decision to purchase or earn a device, $15 on top of that might be out of reach right now. So in some communities, in HUD-assisted communities, we are working to make the internet free, to remove that as a point of friction. And coming back to that point I made earlier about really challenging a polarity between faster and cheaper, we are making the very best internet service that we have available in public and affordable housing at no cost. So our commitment to ConnectHome was to stand with HUD, to stand with the local PHAs and the communities that we serve, to work with the school districts, the cities, then other partners we can bring together from the private sector, but also the community colleges, the nonprofits who are teaching digital literacy, and do our part. I think about it as a chain of dominoes. We are in a position where we are able to be the first domino to tip. Right? We can take that risk as a private sector partner in this work. So the first domino to tip is to say, you know what, let's make the internet free. Let's make it free. Let's reduce that friction. Let's give it to people. Let's give the kind of internet to people that we know we want, right? The internet that I would want to have. Let's treat them as customers in the same way I want to be treated. And so we're bringing gig connectivity into HUD-assisted properties at no cost to the residents, at no cost to the property managers. And we're doing it in ways that have really stretched our product development. So doing it in a way that understands that we need our sign-up flow to be incredibly smooth. We need to have real teams on the ground to help people through that sign-up flow. We need to work with partners so that when people come in to an event that we're hosting where they can sign up for internet, there are also people in the room who can help them purchase or earn a computer, sign up for, if they wish to, a digital literacy workshop to learn how to use that computer and how to use that internet and how to use it safely, and how to find high value, high impact applications and sites. Like ABC Mouse and PBS Kids and maybe their school district portal and the bus maps and all these things, right, that we have learned after years and years of internet use, help families learn to use that safely. And so what I love about a couple of these pictures is, any event with Secretary Castro is incredibly powerful. That's Secretary Castro on the right with my Vice President Dennis Kish and the Mayor of Kansas City, Mayor Sly James. On the left is a resident from the West Bluff community in Kansas City, Missouri, named Tamara. She has a son who is 4 years old who was maybe even more popular than Secretary Castro at that event that day. He was just this charming, bubbly 4-year-old running around dressed to the nines and having a good time. But Tamara was making a decision to get her family online. And even though that internet connection was free to her, we were asking her to do something. We were asking her to make a decision for her family. She also signed up for digital literacy classes and then earned a device. She also offered to be a connected neighbor. It's a pilot we're running to figure out Google Fiber has a strong brand. We rely heavily on the billion-dollar brand that is Google. That is a different kind of brand than the credibility and brand that comes from knowing somebody. And Tamara knows everybody at West Bluff Community. And she was excited about the decision she had made to get online, and she wanted to talk to her neighbors and friends and her son's parents about that decision she had made and how they might make a similar decision. So she is a connected neighbor doing that work of organizing in her development. And she's working right there with a product manager, a Google Fiber product manager, who spends most of his days in front of a computer in Silicon Valley and is excited to be doing this work because he sees the impact that it has. And he wanted to go and be at our sign-up events because he wanted to see how does the sign-up flow work? Right? When people see the Wi-Fi signal, do they know how to claim it, name it, and then protect it? How can we tighten that feedback loop so the feedback from our customers is going straight into our product teams? And this is the kind of work that John, that product manager, builds, is a sign-up flow that is really deliberate in the way that we engage and intentionally reflective of the partnership that we have. So this isn't about just Google Fiber doing this work. It's about the deep partnership we have, in this case, with the Housing Authority of Kansas City. Reflecting that everywhere where we are doing our events and our signups. And this is why we do what we do. So much more impressive than the people I get to work with every day behind our computers in Silicon Valley are the families, the property managers, the local community partners who are doing this work every day. So what we have here are some pictures from San Antonio and from Durham. Jimmy, the gentleman on the right, is holding a monitor. He has in his bag a PC that he has earned. He has earned that by going through 8 hours worth of workshops that started with basic digital literacy, moved into financial literacy. One of our local banking partners came and helped him set up his first bank account, and moved into how to use the internet to find a job. And on the 4th day of his training, Jimmy began applying for jobs. He applied online for a job at McDonald's. 80% of Fortune 500 jobs can only be applied to online, including McDonald's. He applied to a job at McDonald's. He got called in for an interview. He got that job the next day and came back and gave his instructor a hug. And he said, I wouldn't have had that job had it not been for the opportunity to earn this device and take this class. One of the other wonderful unintended consequences, or something at least we didn't foresee, was the community building aspects of a lot of this work. So much of what we're doing now, so much of what the ConnectHome demonstration projects are, is really built on some learnings that we have from the Housing Authority for the City of Austin, HACA, in Austin, who developed a comprehensive program much like this 2 years ago, and is generous in sharing their learnings. One of the things we learned there, and we are now seeing, is that when neighbors and residents come together to take classes, to earn a device, to get connected to the internet for the first time, they are also building community. So we're bringing people together in common spaces. They're working together toward common goals, oftentimes on collaborative projects, right? We'll put people in a Google Doc or create a PowerPoint presentation together. They're working together toward a common goal, and that has a wonderful outcome of community building. And then, oh look, they're all number 1. These are some of our learnings. There are 3, 1, 2, 3. But when we're also just getting started. I mean, this work is still, fairly new. But these are some of the things that we are seeing and learning along the way. That, first of all, we have to frame the issue of digital inclusion or digital equity broadly. This is not just about learning how to use a computer and how to access the internet. This is about economic opportunity, educational access, and equity much more broadly. We frame it that way, we attract new funders and partners to the table. So the community college in Austin wants to donate their end-of-life cycle devices so that Goodwill can refurbish them, and then we can put them into the hands of residents who've earned them. The Ford Foundation, who's committed to affordable housing work, wants to see what this work looks like, and so steps in, takes a risk and steps in for the first time because we've connected it back to the issues that they really focus on. So we need to frame it broadly. We also need to know that there is no cut and paste way to do this, right? We can't come in and say, this is how your program shall be. We need to listen to and let our local partners really lead. They know their residents, they know what will work. We should continue to be flexible in the resources that we provide. That should be our role as a private sector partner. But we need to support and follow local leadership. And then we need to, very importantly, understand that connectivity itself doesn't solve the problem. I could put a fiber jack in the apartment or the house of every resident, and if they don't have a device, if they haven't had that conversation with a friend, a neighbor like Tamara, to understand really what it might mean for their family, that fiber jack isn't going to do anything, right? It does not create new opportunities until there's a device and the relevance and the training, and it all comes together with that resident in mind. So I tried not to talk too much about our work. I do love to talk about it, though. And so we'd love to have you follow some of what we're doing. Follow our blog, follow us on social. And I'd be very, very open to your feedback and constructive critique as you follow our work and see what we're doing.
So let's just see. I think we can have time for 2 or 3 questions if there are right now. The only thing I'd ask on your questions is don't ask how do I get Google Fiber to come to my community. That you can take up with Erica offline. But anything broader for either Deputy Assistant Secretary Johnson or Erica, please. Yeah, you stand and project.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenna from McCullough. I work with the American Youth Policy Forum here in DC, but I also volunteer every week with the Homeless Children's Playtime Project at DC General Homeless Shelter. And so my question is Google Fiber thinking about ways to help communities in homeless shelters? And given the comments made earlier in the key remarks about how, particularly in DC, there's more families with children in the shelters than single persons. How is Google Fiber thinking about serving those communities as well?
Okay, why don't we just we'll take a couple more and then we'll let our panelists respond. Anybody else? Yeah, Michael, please.
Michael Muir, Housing Authority. What pertinence do your topics have to the increasing reliance on mobile devices? And in particular, Calvin, did the numbers you started with include mobile devices?
We have one more. Anybody else have? Yeah, sorry to run across. Yeah, go ahead.
Juliana Stewart, I'm with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. You mentioned the domino effect and that Google Fiber was the first one. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you see as some of the potential, who those players are, there might be other dominoes, or where you see that going.
So why don't we have the 2 of you just respond to those, and Calvin, I know that you actually have some more to say, and I'm going to ask you to say it after a weekend report.
Okay,
That's
certainly,
Yeah.
certainly. So in terms of mobile, I actually am spending a great deal of time, so I'll talk about this shortly. But we have a survey that we filled it, and one of the questions that we ask is, how is it that folk are accessing in their home, which types of devices they're using, and what we're finding is that mobile has to be part of the ecosystem, as I'm calling it. There are families that are using mobile, that have smartphones that are being used for phones, but it's also used for the internet. And the reason they're doing it is because they don't want to have 2 plans. In some instances, there could be the case where folk are actually push the smartphone and using smartphone to access the internet because the local ISPs are have really rigid requirements to get access to the internet, even when there's a low-cost option available within their jurisdiction. We're finding that access to the internet using mobile devices is very tricky. One, you have folk who have mobile devices and no data plan, so they're using public access. They have mobile devices plus a data plan, but they're also using in-home, which we need to figure out, well, why are they doing that? Because they're probably spending way too much money. But but we have to think about the use of mobile devices as part of the ecosystem and then begin thinking about how to make that a much more cost-friendly approach, because in many instances, it's costing folk more, and I believe it's costing them more because of the rigid restrictions that the local ISPs have.
So fiber's model right now, and we are a fiber to the home business, and so that is a fixed service. Our digital inclusion approach is also, though, very clear that there is no one singular approach here, and that the work that's happening in the mobile space and some of those adoption curves, adoption trends can be really positive. At the same time, there are many things that you cannot do on even on a smartphone or a tablet that you can do on a desktop or a laptop with a fixed connection. Very hard to apply for a job, to write an essay, to apply to college if this is all you have. And so the answers really need to be yes, both, yes, and kinds of answers. And I think that's related to the question about how do we work with people who are homeless and the service providers who are working with those communities. We're making investments as well in community spaces and places, the places where people go to access the internet when they are not at a home or a home of their own. So places like community centers, parks and rec centers, libraries, where people are going to access the internet. We want to bring our gig internet there. We want to also invest in the digital literacy capacity that exists at those organizations through programs like a digital inclusion fellowship that we run. It's kind of like Teach for America for digital equity. But we think that those are some really strong ways to reach people when they're not at home. And I think you raise a really good point. We should be thinking about what that could look like in shelters where people are spending the night and the mornings as well. And then dominoes. I think that the set of dominoes that we line up in every community needs to be somewhat different. That is why I hire community organizers, people who know their landscape and their communities. We need to have at that table, though, we need to have funders, we need to have the private sector, we need to have device partners, and nonprofit organizations who know their communities very, very well. Cities, schools, the PHA, and the property managers are also really, really key partners pretty consistently.
Okay. So,
If I can ask a couple of minutes.
okay, certainly we'll keep it brief. All right, so just really quickly to talk about the national evaluation, I'm going to just hit a few of these slides. Some of them I've already talked about, but this is the one slide that I think is important. We're focusing on K through 12 households. Why? And public housing specifically, because they are the largest share of our population. So it makes sense to start there, and then to kind of make certain that if indeed we're going to start with connectivity, education is important, but K through 12 is where we have the largest chunk of our population. I'd like to start off by sharing that. ConnectHome is about devices, connectivity, devices, and digital literacy. We're hoping to learn how it's being used for education, employment, health navigation, and social network, that is, increasing social networks. Our sampling frame, we have about 99,000 households within the 28 communities, that is with K through 12 children. We sampled 10,000 households and 14 communities self-administered, and I think many of you all are actually here today, so I thank you all. We actually translated the survey into Spanish and 7 other languages. This is kind of the way the postcard looked, letting folk know that indeed a survey will be coming. So we had a version in English, Spanish, letting them know that that they would actually, in completing the survey, that they would be eligible for a $5 lottery to have their name entered. This is a survey, maybe hard to reach, but there were 4 primary questions. Do you have access in the home to include smartphone? How is it that you access? Which types of device do you access? And then the question about, do you know about ConnectHome? And so, Michael, the second and third questions are the questions that makes it really tricky for us. And keep in mind, these are 28 separate studies. So when you get the data back, you're talking about 28 separate studies because no one community is the same, and we're finding that the patterns vary, right? And so we're able to really look at what smartphone access look like, what in-home access look like, and speculate about what some of the challenges are. Focus group discussions, we're going to be doing them in 5 communities, specifically looking at subscribers to the ConnectHome offer. Also those members who still do not have access to internet in the home, to figure out, well, why, what's going on, and then finding out from PHAs specifically what are some of the promising practices and what are the challenges that they're actually experiencing. These are the topics that we want to get at. Again, how is it being used for your child's education, your own education, employment and job searching, and health and well-being. And we're going to follow that up with a telephone interview that will likely span across 10 to 15 communities. We're looking at probably having about 800 to 1,200 interviews completed. We're probably going to provide a sampling frame of about 5,500. We're hoping to begin that in September. So many of the communities here in this room will be working with you all to try to figure out how is it that we get access to them. The telephone survey will cover some of the same topics. Specifically, we want to get at how is it that they're using technology, education-related activity, healthcare-related activities, job search, and also digital literacy is an important one for us as well. This is kind of like a milestone chart just to tell you kind of how we're going to be rolling things out, and I'll stop here.